Teachers of Reddit, what is the worst thing you've seen a parent do to their child that either made you want to or did make you call Child Protective Services? Couple years back I was running a preschool classroom in a low-income area. Had a kid who would constantly come in visibly dirty, usually always had a dirty diaper, was almost 5, so we had a theory that she never really got a bath or changed or anything. Changed her up before sending her home one day, and I had my assistant draw a star on her diaper. Sure enough, go to change her when she arrives the next morning, and there's the star on her diaper. She had been in the same soaked diaper for nearly 18 hours. That was smart to mark the diaper. Had a student beaten so badly he couldn't sit in his chair. Entire back was covered in lashes. Admin gets the mom to come to the school and the cops are there waiting for her. They arrest her on the spot, while taking another child, an infant, out of her arms to do so. When they asked her why she did it, her response was, because he needed it. She was so warped she couldn't even come up with an excuse. So sad. Taking infant. You won't be needing this one anymore, either. Not a teacher, but I was playing with some kids one time and one of them fell down because of the roots around this giant tree. She started crying immediately, but not because of the injury, but because her white shoes got scuffed. Her little brother hugged her really tight and kept saying he'd try to find a way to hide them when they got home so that mom didn't see them. The girl said she was going to get beaten up again. Told my mom. Mom called the police. Never saw the kids again. That is heartbreaking. I'm so happy you told your mom, and that your mom actually did something. I hope the kids are okay now. Had one particular year where we had a bunch of students who had terrible home lives. Roaches coming out of book bags, dirty clothes, etc. One parent-teacher conference, the parent was clearly on pills and kept talking about what a terrible child she had. But the kid wasn't bad at all. They just had low grades because they missed so much school. That summer their house burned down and their brother was arrested for making child pee. Another set of parents came in that year with a toddler wearing only a diaper and they were all really dirty, like they hadn't bathed in a week. The child always looked clean at school though, which made me think they cleaned up in the bathroom before school. Not a teacher, but I work in student support in a high school. We frequently put in child protection reports. The worst one was a 14-year-old girl living with her baby sister, mentally ill mum, and violent dad. Dad and mum get high on them, dad beats mum, dad rapes girl, dad gets girl pregnant and punches her in the stomach until the baby dies. Girl denies anything is happening at home because she thinks if she is removed, she can't protect her baby sister anymore. Dad ended up in jail. Jesus Christ. Thank frick the rapist ended up in jail. Special needs student had markings on both wrists. When placing his wrists together it was obvious they were being tied together. It ended up that his daycare was tying them together each day. This is freaking sickening. Freshman came in smelling like cat urine, which is a sign of cooking, especially in a rural school district. I told the nurse. Nurse and principal pulled the student from class. Never saw her again. Bro, I once sat next to a kid who always smelled like pee. I thought he was just unhygienic, but now I'm starting to think otherwise. Did my first CPS report on a student this year. She's a very emotional child and I noticed something was up immediately when she started acting out in class. She opened up to me at recess one day, saying that her parents fight all the time. They scream and yell and hit each other and it makes her sad. She said that one night, dad was about to hit mom and she didn't want him to, so she got in the way to stop him and he ended up hitting her in the mouth instead. What's crazy is that her stories were so similar to what I went through as a kid. My parents would always have these ugly fights where they would scream and throw things at each other and my mom would end up physically attacking my dad, among other things like pull a knife out in front of us and threaten suicide. It's crazy to look back and think that if I would have confided in my teacher or counselor about all of that, they would have reported it. I never thought that till my student confided in me about her own family issues. It's crazy to look back and think that if I would have confided in my teacher or counselor about all of that, they would have reported my parents to CPS. Maybe, maybe not. Recognition of abuse has changed a lot over the years. As a child of the 80s who had bones broken by a parent, the doctor I saw didn't even bother to report it. My friend is a special ed teacher for the really bad cases. She's trying to get out of it because it's basically killing her. A lot of the kids that are in her classes are there because of the horrible things that have been done to them. One pair of sisters, maybe 6 and 8, came from an Eastern European orphanage where they were molested. Luckily, they got adopted by an American couple, so they got to start a new life together. Then their new dad started molesting them. She calls CPS a lot outside of school, but I once called 911 for an infant that was left in a hot car in the sun with all doors and windows closed and locked. You should have seen the cop yelling at the mother when she got back to her car. There was once an incident where the police smashed the window of a car to rescue what turned out to be a realistic infant doll. Not me, but my mom. This kid was acting up at school, mostly Kindergarten stuff, and when his parents found out, they would lock him in a closet and literally slide trays of food under a slot in the door. It was like the kid was in prison. You might think, whoa, severe timeout, but this kid missed school for 3 days because he was in the closet. It gets worse. He told his teachers why he was gone, so they called DCFS to handle the situation. The parents find out and buy a tarantula. You know where this is going. They let the tarantula bite the kid and send him off to school with a big butt spider bite on his hand. I saw him a couple weeks later and the nurse had wrapped it in gauze because of how bad it had gotten. What the actual frick? This is the worst fricking thing I've ever read. You know where this is going. No, normal people don't go there, and I wasn't prepared. Oh my god. One of my preschoolers' parents sent him in the same socks over and over and he had so much earwax and hung that it smelt. I told my boss and went out to buy him some socks. Since we were playing with water I just acted like he accidentally got his socks wet and put another pair on him and sent them both home. You bet your bottom dollar he was wearing the same socks I just gave him the next day. People who treat their children like that need to go to Guantanamo Bay. It makes me so angry. Had a friend in high school whose mom refused to buy her toiletries, clothes, food. She had to work and pay for it all herself and also wouldn't pay for her school lunches. The friend had 2 little brothers who were spoiled heavily and the mom wore 2 giant buttons of the boys on her clothes everywhere, but treated the friend like the plague. I visited her house once, which was fairly new, and the counters were covered in old dishes and there was pet fesses everywhere. They had 3 large dogs and multiple cats, all indoor pets. Thankfully our school got involved and she got emancipated from them at 17. She kept in contact with her dad, who was mostly under the mom's thumb but never did anything bad to her. Substitute here. I had to call CPS when a middle schooler broke down when I told him I was sending him to the assistant principal's office for making inappropriate comments to classmates. He begged me not to because he couldn't get in trouble with dad again. I asked why. Because my spidey senses went off, and he showed me the bruises and blood on his thighs and told me they went higher, in a case CPS was already involved in. I had an 8th grader with frequent pants wetting incidents, which is a massive red flag for sexual abuse. I had a 7-year-old confess suicidal thoughts to me. I still think about him and hope he got help. He cried and thanked me when I told him I had feelings like that at his age, too. I had a 5-year-old wrap me up in a bear hug and beg me to adopt him so he could have a mommy who loved him. He'd known me for 2 hours, and I'd told him I liked his drawing. Last week was my last week of teaching. I will miss the kids terribly, but not the mental burden of so many babies going through heck in a system that is set up to fail most of them from the start. I had a 5-year-old wrap me up in a bear hug and beg me to adopt him so he could have a mommy who loved him. He'd known me for 2 hours, and I'd told him I liked his drawing. Jesus frick, this one is heartbreaking. If the simple act of telling a kid that you like their drawings brings up such a reaction, I swear someone is cutting onions in my vicinity. A teacher said to me once that she would adopt me if I ever wanted to run away from home. I don't think she was kidding. I was the one who discovered the abuse. I had a student who was strangely very violent, irritable and loud. He was very difficult and the other kids were afraid of him because he was a bully and would beat them up. One day, I moved to take him to timeout after an incident like this occurred again. It was a daily thing. Well, as soon as I stood up and started walking to him, suddenly, he throws up his arms in that cross position. If you've ever been hit as a kid, you know the pose. I was obviously confused and worried. I sat him down and asked him what he was talking about, and he is just bawling, screaming, "Mommy, don't hit me. Please don't hurt me," over and over. I lifted up his sleeves and there were bruises all over his arms. Technically, I'm still a student teacher only, so I wasn't allowed in the room during the investigation. I did hear from a colleague that he was in fact removed from the home and the mother had been beating him. I don't know if this counts, but I called the CPS for my sisters and I. My sisters and I were regularly beaten for failing any tests. We were sat at a desk and when we didn't answer a question right we were punched, hair pulled, face slammed into the desk and pinched. Our parents beat us really often and sometimes for no reason. Once I was sweeping when she told me to and I was scared cause she was going one by one to each of my sisters to beat them and I heard the screaming get closer. I got frantic and stopped cause the beating was inevitable. She just started kicking when she pushed me to the floor. The breaking point was when she tried to drown my sister in the bathtub. I told my counselor, who wrote down the report completely of everything. I desperately asked to go into foster care. Months later, about 6-7 months, a woman came to talk to me. They told me to go to the front and the receptionist whispered, "Your caseworker is in the room to the right." CPS interviewed me and her face was in shock. She apologized for taking so long and said we go to those who can't speak for themselves first. Then she made one home visit. My sisters were too scared to say anything and I told her please don't give up, they're too scared to say anything because my parents are listening in the other room. She nodded and left. Again months later I came home from a friend's and my mom said CPS gave her an entire copy of the report I gave to them. I've never seen her more angry. I thought she was bluffing and said no I didn't. Then she said the date, time, and what I said in the report. I told my counselor and she said well I called CPS and they said they didn't do that. So yeah, the abuse just went on. To this day my stomach curdle at the thought of why and how CPS could just do nothing. Just one home visit and gone. TLDR. Reported abuse to CPS. CPS does one check and says sucks to suck, not enough evidence. Didn't do anything. And gave my mom a copy of the report. I am so sorry CPS failed you. I hope you are in a better place now. When I was a teen, my mother had to call CPS to report my stepsister and her husband for abusing their kids. Physical abuse and kids were always bruised and filthy. CPS did the home visit and nothing else about it, but they did cause havoc by telling the parents that it was my mom who reported it. Not me, but a close relative. First grader came in completely exhausted. When asked why, he detailed how his mother had taken him to work the night before, in her car, and how he had to sit in the front while she worked. I'm friends with some teachers. One family literally lived in a cave. They did periodic welfare checks but the kids were fed, cleaned and clothed well enough and they were sheltered, so that was that as I understand. The parents have never been found to be on drugs or anything. They were just so poor that they lived in a freaking cave. This is in rural Appalachia in the US, which even my husband, who does home health, always has at least one patient with dirt floors and half caved in roofs. Working in home health really makes you hyper aware that your version of messy dirty is never as bad as someone else's version of it. I've written about this before, so I'm just going to copy paste my answer because I am not in the right mindset today to actually relive it through words. About 5 years ago in my 10th grade English class, one of the best students I've ever had the honor of teaching came to class horribly beaten up. He was over an hour early and just slowly walked to his seat and sat there quietly. I sat next to him begging him to tell me what happened. He did, but I wish he hadn't. His dad found out that my student was gay and decided that no son 0Fs would be, or could be, gay. So he decided to beat the gayness out of him. He beat him to a pulp. 2 black eyes, a broken nose, broken ribs, and numerous cuts and bruises. When he was done beating him, he ripped my student's clothes off and put a meat cleaver on the table and made him watch gay pee naked in order to make sure that he wouldn't get a hard on. He told him if he got hard, he would chop his penis off. I didn't let him finish. I didn't want to know what else he had endured. I called the cops. An ambulance was sent for my student. They found the dad at work. He was an elementary school teacher, teaching his class like it was just another normal Monday. It took everything I had to keep from going there and running that mother sucker over with my car. Thankfully his mom wasn't as controlled as I was. She tried ripping her husband's head off at the police station. It literally took 4 cops to get her off of him. She's about 5'2", 100 pounds. He's about 6'2", 250 pounds. And she fricked him up. And after she walked out of that station, she went home and burned every single one of his things in the fireplace. Glad to say my student made a full recovery. He, along with his mom and siblings, spent all the holidays with us. I'm so glad this has a happy ending. It's so hard seeing other LGBTQ children go through stuff like this and never get help. It makes me so angry when parents think that being gay is something that someone chooses to do. Not as serious as other stories, but my aunt works with a lot of immigrant children, usually grade 1-3, and she said she had noticed a student being very tired every day and not doing any homework, so the next time she met with the parents she asked them if he is getting enough sleep or what he does at home. The parents tell my aunt that they make him help in the kitchen of their restaurant every evening after school, and they usually get home at around 1 AM. My aunt was very angry and tried explaining that he can't be working at such a young age and until so late because he had schoolwork to do and it was affecting his grades. Aunt also reported it to the principal, but I have no idea if it got to the point of calling CPS about it. I think it's really sad that kids, especially this young, have to work in this world. My family has a rather big house with respective personal grounds. I'm 17, I don't have a problem with helping, but until 1 AM would even be too much for me. I will lead with I'm not a teacher. However, I have had to report to CPS. A sweet 14-year-old joined a server I'm in on Discord. I also happen to be a moderator, and immediately we couldn't help but find her to be a refreshing change in company. She's passionate about animals, bright, basically teaching herself as her mom is doing her best but still struggling and she's at home. But the more she talked about her mom, the more alarmed our mod team got. She was jaundiced, losing weight no matter what she ate, had constant stomach pain, and despite all those alarming symptoms, her mom refused to even take her to a GP. Her mother would scream at her if she asked for help with school things. She was severely stunted in education, and she was regularly told she was useless and couldn't do anything. The last straw was when she finally admitted there was physical abuse, as we suspected, including a chair being thrown at her head. Despite most of us being under 25 and struggling ourselves, we refused to leave a kid unsupervised in that position. After a long, serious conversation about what the symptoms and her health could mean, the escalation in physical abuse and the obvious assistance her mom needed, I got the necessary information for the CPS report and filed it immediately. In 2 days, the agents arrived, assessed the situation, and were able to get some sense into the mother. The 14-year-old is now getting help with school, going to a specialist children's hospital, and the mom is working to get her own issues under control with aid while CPS makes sure everything is going right. Sometimes the solution isn't remove the kid, sometimes it's assist the parent. Abuse is always abuse, but it isn't always intentional. When it isn't intentional, it often alarms the parent to realize what they've done. As a child from that situation, with loving but also abusive parents who didn't know better, I have been determined to help others in that situation. You really did a great thing. This girl and probably even her mother will thank you and remember what you did for their whole lives, and it's amazing. Not a teacher, but I'm a camp counselor. A few years back we had a young girl get dropped off by her parents, and when they opened the door of their car to drop her off, smoke literally poured out. The parents were hotboxing their car at 8 AM dropping their 6-year-old daughter off at camp. She 100% got to contact high and CPS was called within the hour. I had a student come in one day with 4 empty kitty litter jugs tied around his neck. The big, gallon-sized jugs. You could tell he was nearly crying. I pulled him into my office and asked him what was going on. He had forgotten to change the cat's litter box one time. His parents, though this was an appropriate response, they made him wear them to school. He was 16. I took him down to the counselor's office and let them deal with those psychos. My wife has a kid in her class at the person's house her parents were staying in burned down 3 months ago. So now they live in a van that the dad uses to work deliver food in. It's an unfortunate situation, but at some point CPS has to get involved because the kid is definitely not getting bathed, eating well, or getting medical help when sick. Not me, but a friend of mine used to teach at a religious school. She was not a follower of the same religion, but most of not all of the teachers, students, and staff were. Won't name the religion, but I guess one of her kids was showing up to school with marks on his body. When she asked him about them, he said his parents would hit him when he misbehaved. I'm paraphrasing of course, but it didn't look good. My friend went to the principal of the school and told her what the child had said. The principal swept it under the rug and told her it was none of her business and to stay out of it. The kid kept showing up with marks, so when there was a parent-teacher conference she asked the parents about it. They proceeded to talk to the principal and try to get her fired from the school. She then got reprimanded for intervening and didn't work there for too long after that. I was working with her at the time at another job and she tell me what was going on when we had shifts together. I'm pretty sure she ended up calling CPS and they investigated it. Not sure of the outcome. If by religious school you mean private school, it's insane, but not unexpected. How much favor money will get you? CPS intake worker here. The calls we get from teachers range from kid has lice to outcries of sexual abuse, leaving a young child alone for days at a time, to extreme physical abuse. I get teachers who are frequent callers and teachers who have worked 20 years and are making their first report. I tell them all the time that that's a good thing. I had to say something once about a little one who had lice for 3 weeks. They kept bringing the poor kid back. You would lift the back of the hair and you could see them just infested there. Oh, I couldn't imagine how uncomfortable that has to be. Not a teacher, but had CPS called on my ex-husband and me. I'd shown his daughters a bunch of Weird Al videos over the weekend, and there's a line in headline news. Parody of MMMMMMMMMMMMMMMMMMMMMMMMMMMMMMMMMMMMMMMMMMMMMMMMMMMMMMMMMMMMMMMMMMMMMMMMMMMMMMMMMMMMMMMMMMMMMMMMMMMMMMMMMMMMMMMMMMMMMMMMMMMMMMMMMMMMMMMMMMMMMMMMMMMMMMMMMMMMMMMMMMMMMMMMMMMMMMMMMMMMMMMMMMMMMMMMMMMMMMMMMMMMMMMMMMMMMMMMMMMMMMMMMMMMMMMMMMMMMMMMMMMMMMMMMMMMMMMMMMMMMMMMMMMMMMMMMMMMMMMMMMMMMMMMMMMMMMMMMMMMMMMMMMMMMMMMMMMMMMMMMMMMMMMMMMMMMMMMMMMMMMMMMMMMMMMMMMMMMMMMMMMMMMMMMMMMMMMMMMMMMMMM guy who made his wife so mad one night that she cut off his whiner. So the oldest, 5, goes to school and tells her teacher her dad showed her a movie where a guy's whiner got cut off. It was fine, but I swear I never imagined Weird Al being the cause of a CPS visit. I feel like that's one where the teacher should have asked a couple clarification questions. CPS was called on me a long time ago by our neighbors. I was 5ish and screaming my head off when the cops appear. The neighbors thought I was being beaten, but I really just didn't want to take a bath. I remember when I got taken by CPS made me see the real family values. Changed my whole outlook on life. Been so long since I've seen them. I wish I could be able to thank them with all the love they showed me. Thank you, foster parents. My wife is a school counselor. The worst case she had to deal with is a kindergartner whose dad gave her the clap. Justice was swift after she made the call, but my wife still beats herself up for not calling sooner. Probably the little girl did not know any different as her dad was abusing her from infancy. Bonus story. She currently has one student who isn't quite bad enough for CPS to do anything, but the kid's parent will not do any laundry for her. So my wife has a wardrobe of clothes for the girl. When the girl gets to school she takes a shower and puts on fresh clothes. The ones she wore and get washed. Swear my elementary school teachers wanted to. When me and my older brothers were young we would fight all the time and raise heck. If any of us did something wrong our mom would whip us with belts. We came into school with bruises all the time, but we gave each other bruises. I'm not a teacher but a parent. A kid told me and the teacher that his mom was pregnant and she said if it was a girl she didn't want it. Then later he told me he didn't like his mom BC she was mean to him. And he told me some other things I can't remember at all at the moment. He was a first grader. I told the teacher and left it up to her to report it. My son and this kid are now 4th graders. And this other kid has been to probably 10 different schools and now is back at our school. Please don't rely on another person to call CPS if you think it's needed. You can call too. By law, if a teacher thinks they need to call CPS, they call CPS. Every time anything happens, they are supposed to make that call. It's a part of being what's called a mandatory reporter, a person in direct childcare who has an immediate responsibility for the child. And you can call, too. Impartial information from the community helps cases move forward towards a good solution, and it's always anonymous, toll free, even. Save the number for your state in your phone. It might save a kid's life. Here's a case where CPS was called for a ridiculous reason. A friend of ours was having trouble with her 13-year-old daughter. She threw a hissy fit about what clothes she was going to wear to school, from a closet full, and missed the school bus. As a punishment, the mom told her she wasn't going to drive her, she'd have to walk. Because the girl was 10 minutes tardy, she got called into the principal's office and went through the whole story. It turns out the family lives just over 1 mile from the school, and it was just below 40 degrees that day. Bingo! This violates some district policy against children walking to school in a cold environment. CPS gets called and the mom gets a home visit. What a crock of shite. When I first read this I thought you meant negative 40 degrees and just thinking WTF. Not a parent, but my parents got CPS called in them when my little brother was an infant. He was over a month premature and was sick a lot. He got sick one time and spiked a high fever. It ended up causing his soft spot to swell as well. At the exact same time he had too much carotene in his system and he very suddenly turned yellow. So my dad brought a very yellow screaming baby to the hospital, where my mom worked, and was very accused of causing shaking baby syndrome. CPS was called before they even did tests, only to later find out everything was caused by the fever and carotene. 16 years later the bottoms of his hands and feet still have a yellow tint. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.